Welcome to the Law School Insider, where we have conversations with students, lawyers, and employers.
Succeeding in law school is something that you must prepare for, not only before you begin, but throughout your law school journey, and that's what this podcast is all about. I am your host, Dr. Christopher Lewis, and I will draw from my over 20 years of experience in the college admission field, as well as bring forth the experiences of others as we delve deeper into the issues. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Law School Insider. I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Lewis, and today we're doing something a little bit different. Every once in a while here at Western Michigan University Cooley Law School, we have some amazing guests that come to speak to our students. And I'm lucky at times to be able to record what they have to say because the amazing things that they share are things that definitely you want to learn from as well. And today, the Honorable Donald L. Allen Jr. is joining us today, and he was appointed judge of the 55th District Court by Governor Jennifer Granholm on December 22nd, 2008. And just recently, he came to Western Michigan University Cooley Law School to speak to students about integrity, and in a conversation entitled "Integrity: A Modest Proposal." Not only did he share amazing stories and amazing resources and insights, but he also answered questions of people in the audience. And some of these questions may be similar questions to ones that you might have had yourself. So today, please learn from Judge Allen and know that we will be sharing more of these type of conversations as time progresses, and I have more opportunities to be able to record their inspiring words.
Hey, thanks everyone for coming. It's great to see this turnout. This is due in large part, of course, to the Student Bar Association sponsoring such a great meal for us. So thanks to the Student Bar Association for doing so. I really appreciate working with them. You all have to have noticed that we have a lot more student activities and fun stuff going on at the school. And that's due in large part, if not complete part, to the partnership between the campus and the Student Bar Association. So thanks so much for that. I just want to thank you all for coming. I'm gratified to see so many staff as well as faculty here. And this is a campus where we are all engaged in a learning environment, and that includes the staff. They are a key component of our school, and I just think it's wonderful that they are so involved. So we're here today for the Integrity in Our Communities event, an event that we try to do annually, and as soon as I heard about it, I said, I know just the guy. And so, but let me talk about the event first. The Integrity in Our Communities speaker has that very idea. I mean, it's defined by its title. The idea is to bring in those from outside the school, those in the community who are locally recognized, statewide recognized, such as Judge Allen, nationally recognized, which Judge Allen is for some of his work with the opioid courts, and sort of talk about, give them wide breadth, no reins at all, to talk about the issues that they think fit within the definition of integrity. You know, that comes from the Greek word integer, meaning the whole. So you talk about the whole person, and it could be the whole person as a lawyer, the whole lawyer, or it could be other aspects that make up a person who is intended to be not just a minister of justice, as Thomas Cooley says, but a representative of the community. So we give them free rein to talk about ethical issues, lawsuits on ethical or professional matters, other skills that are necessary, whatever it might be. And so we present this award to those legal professionals who demonstrate the highest integrity in their profession within that broad definition. One definition of integrity that I would also use is that you choose thoughts and actions based upon values rather than based on personal gain. And I appreciate that, and I think that when you meet Judge Allen, you will feel the same. Before I call him up to give the award, I want to say some nice things about Judge Allen. I've known him for over 20 years, so I can be a tiny bit flippant there. We are not just colleagues, but friends, again, for over 20 years. I was already at the State Attorney General's office when he joined. And I will tell you that Judge Allen had a wide range of experience at that office. I got to know him when he was in the Corrections Division, which I think was probably about his third assignment there. And after that, he was in healthcare fraud, prosecuting doctors. Not easy to do, as Professor Flores or Professor Nicolucci will tell you. Those are some tough prosecutions because these are not indigent defendants. These are criminal defendants that can hire the very best attorneys to defend them. And sometime along in there, it gets lost in the midst of time, Governor, then Attorney General Granholm, appointed me to be the chair of the Litigation Advisory Board, which is just like it sounds. When we had those really big cases that shouldn't be just McDaniel making a recommendation to the Attorney General based upon the trial attorney and that attorney supervisor, we'd have this group that would really consider them. The most obvious would be the multi-state, multi-defendant tobacco litigation and whether or not the terms of that were acceptable to the state based upon state laws in the different states, and we had to focus in on Michigan settlement. So that's what we did on the Litigation Advisory Board. It was one of those rare opportunities that you have in the law where you could focus in on a case. You have to think really big thoughts outside of academia, at least, when think really big thoughts about what the right thing to do for the people of the state of Michigan was. And I can tell you that at that point, I knew what a rare individual that Judge Don Allen is, because he was always thoughtful. He was always deliberate. He always understood multiple sides of every issue. You know, frankly, I picked him because I wanted somebody from healthcare fraud, which was a growing area of the law, and I felt we needed representation from that on the statewide litigation advisory board. But it was those qualities that became clear at that point. And as he progressed, I know that he kept those same qualities. He became, when the Attorney General became governor, he was appointed Deputy Legal Counsel. A few years later, it wasn't immediate. He stayed at the AG's office under Attorney General Mike Cox. He just told me that Mike Cox kicked him off the Litigation Advisory Board, which says something about one or the other of those individuals. And I'll leave it at that. And after doing that, he was the drug czar. He was the director of the Office of Drug Control Policy. Again, one of those positions that really requires that integration of both law and policy in a very thoughtful, deliberate way for what's best for the people of the state of Michigan. Having that position made him the perfect individual to then be at the 55th District Court and take over as the presiding judge of the sobriety court. Sobriety court, of course, as the sound of it suggests, has to do with a lot of different areas, not just intoxication from alcohol, but has to do with lots of other substance abusers. And the focusing on the idea of restorative justice, focusing on rehabilitation of repeat substance abusers, recognizing that there is a sickness involved here, not just the criminal activity, which is the most obvious sign of that sickness or illness. As a result, I can tell you that in doing so and in his recent focus on the opioid crisis, that Judge Allen, I think, has literally changed, if not saved, hundreds of lives and certainly saved thousands of tax dollars and deserves to be recognized for excellence. But before I end, I just want to point out one interesting fact that I just learned. He is a 1983 graduate of Wayne State University Law School. So he and Associate Dean Jim Robb walked across the stage together. So I leave it to you as to which one looks younger or more youthful than the other, but I'm going to guess you will share my opinion on that. He is involved in so many different community organizations that I can't go through all of them in the interest of time. My dear friend, Judge Allen, if you could come up, I'd like to present you with our award. Judge Allen, the podium is yours. Thank you.
All righty. So, you know, I do a fair amount of public speaking, and usually I don't get nervous about doing public speaking, but listening to my friend Mike talk about me, I noticed that there are little beads of perspiration starting to develop, and I wasn't really sure if he was talking about me or somebody that just shared my name. So I guess he was talking about me since I have the podium now. But God, I feel uncomfortable all of a sudden. But this is beautiful. This is wonderful, and thank you so very much for this honor. As a matter of fact, I would just like to thank you guys, just generally speaking, because I didn't actually know a whole lot about what you guys do in terms of professionalism, but you know, being the dutiful student that I am, once I learned that I had been selected for the award, I actually went on the internet, of course, to start to download some information about what was going on, and I found out, much to my amazement, much to my surprise, that this incredible jewel was right beneath my nose, and I never knew that Cooley Law School, Western Michigan University Law School, I should add, I don't want to say the wrong thing, be politically incorrect, actually is a very, very strong proponent of professionalism and ethics. As a matter of fact, when I started doing the research on the internet, it actually led me to look at the website for the American Bar Association. And when I did that, I saw some of the comments that were made by the ABA about Cooley Law School. And I'd just like to share a little bit of that with you. So as I was looking at the ABA, it was the Center for Public Service and Professionalism, and they said about Cooley, that Cooley is awash, that was their word, awash, with programs that are designed to take students from orientation to graduation with the stated goal of making sure that there was a focus on professionalism and ethics. Now, I went to law school a long time ago, and we weren't steeped in ethics and professionalism. We had one class. There was no orientation to professional ethics that carried us from orientation to graduation. So it was amazing to me that I saw that about your school. Not only did I see that, I also saw that you had actually been recognized nationally by the ABA with the E. Smythe Gambrell Award in 2006. And for those of you who don't know who Mr. Gambrell is, he was president of the ABA, and he was president of the ABA Foundation way back in the day, so this was a prestigious award that you guys got. So I actually applaud you guys for all of your history of, come on, give it up for yourself, because that is a very, very important attribute. And I also appreciate you guys bestowing this award to me, because when I saw all of this rich history, this rich lineage that you guys have, and then to see that I was being recognized and being given this award by this school, that actually made the award mean that much more to me. So I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to have the award. I would be remiss, and I know that I'm taking a little bit of license with the microphone, but I would be remiss if I didn't say a thank you to a very special person. And that very special person is to my left, to your right. She's the lovely Deborah Allen, my wife. As I said before, I give lots and lots of speeches. So that means that I'm always somewhere writing little notes about speeches that I'm going to give, and my long-suffering wife just puts up with it. She says I should get paid, and I'm starting to agree with her, but in any event, I always want to make sure that I give her a shout-out because I love you, honey. So, and I also have to give a little shout-out to my friend, General McDaniel. General McDaniels is a longtime friend of mine, as he indicated earlier, and we did work together at the Attorney General's office. I actually just recently ran into him as I was coming back from Hollywood. That's a pregnant, that pregnant pause was intentional, by the way, because it wasn't Hollywood, California, it was Hollywood, Florida. I have a face for radio, not for Hollywood. So, but in all seriousness, one of the things that I wanted to say publicly that I don't think that I've ever said to my friend Mike McDaniel is that I've always watched his career from far and marveled at the things that he has done. And a couple of things that I'll point out is when he helped the city of Lansing as it was recovering from the ice storm, and the work that he did on behalf of BWL, and how he then went over to help the city of Flint as it was dealing with that egregious situation with its drinkable water. And so I've always marveled at the fact, we were all public servants, and I'm a marvel at the fact that he continues to work on behalf of the public. I mean, when I knew Mike, he hadn't even gone to become a general. He was studying war college, and he was raising a family, and he was doing all of this juggling. And he has a lovely wife, too, just as lovely as mine. But I think that General McDaniels deserves a round of applause. Tremendous work on behalf of the state, tremendous work on behalf of the nation through Homeland Security, and he just continues to keep plugging along, and now he's an educator of the next generation of folks that will lead our country. So what I really would like to discuss is the topic of integrity at this moment in time. I believe very firmly, as probably many of you, that public trust appears to be at a tipping point. You know, law is considered to be one of the learned professions along with professions like medicine. And it's an honored and noble profession. And it's really interesting from the perspective that it allows for people to actually be in a position to earn a living by helping other people. But in doing so, we have to have the trust of the public in order to do that. So it carries with it not only that privilege, but the enormous responsibility to be a person of high integrity and high moral fiber and ethical as it relates to what it is that you do. So I was trying to be a little bit cute as I was getting ready to prepare my remarks to kind of try and make it a little bit on the interesting side, because, you know, lawyers, when they get a microphone, they just sound like, you ever see Charlie Brown cartoons and when the adults are talking and it's wah, 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 wah. I don't want to do that. I want people to have a good time and to enjoy the comments. But so as I was preparing it and trying to think of some way to be sort of entertaining, I came up with this topic. And the topic was integrity, a modest proposal. Hopefully getting people to want to think about, well, what is he talking about? A modest proposal. So I have a question for you guys in the audience. Does anyone know who Jonathan Swift is? Anybody? I see just one hand. I think I see two. I was actually hoping to get one of the students. None of the students know who Jonathan Swift is? Jonathan Swift is a person that in 1729 penned a proposal, which he called a modest proposal. And I think you need to kind of understand the background of what was going on at that time. What was going on was there was pestilence, there was poverty, there was a lack of food and famine. And Jonathan Swift was a clerk, St. Patrick's Cathedral, but he was also a satirist. and he penned what he called a modest proposal for preventing the children of the poor from being a burden to their parents or to their country. His proposal was pretty outlandish. His proposal was to sell the children as food for the rich gentlemen and ladies, because they were the persons of means that still needed to eat, and these kids were just a burden to their parents because the parents didn't have the ability to feed them. But again, he was a satirist. So it wasn't serious, folks. You guys are all looking like it was serious. It was not serious, okay? So I just used that as sort of a hook, because I think that what I am actually going to propose is relatively modest. We won't eat any children. Promise. But one of the things that I did want to talk about, sort of getting back to the sort of serious side of the issue, is that as attorneys, we have long sort of suffered in the public's eye as to what our ilk actually does or is about. As a matter of fact, I think it was Shakespeare, Henry VI, first, let's kill all the lawyers. Remember that? Again, I think satirical, but that sort of mindset sort of existed with regard to, well, these lawyers are actually sort of ingrained in our society. Now we sort of think about lawyers as sort of social architects. But back in those times, I mean, you could sort of make a case that maybe the lawyers were part of the problem, but I don't think that that was Shakespeare's point. I think that was just one of the ways to sort of grab attention, but it's one of those things that has survived since the time of Shakespeare that makes you think about, well, wow, why have attorneys had sort of suffered in the public's consciousness for so long? As a matter of fact, attorneys have been referred to as shysters, ambulance chasers. They have been prohibited from advertising until recent times. They were accused of working only for the benefit of folks that have money, and they were considered to have an absence of integrity because they could find a loophole if the money was big enough for you to pay them to find that loophole. So let me try another question, and maybe I can call on one of the students for an answer to this question. And this is sort of a quote. A good lawyer knows the law, a great lawyer knows the judge. Good lawyer knows the law, great lawyer knows the judge. Let's just focus on that second clause. A great lawyer knows the judge. What does that actually mean? Any student? Now, don't forget, I am a judge, and I will call on people. So it's better to volunteer. Yes, ma'am.
It means to know the audience that you're in front of. So even if you know what case you're bringing the arguments, you have to be able to communicate that to the person that's in front of you so they can understand it.
But probably guaranteed, and that's precisely what that means. But probably guaranteed, 9 out of 10 times if you ask a member of the public, if you ask a member of the public, that's going to mean to them that there's some coziness with the judge, as opposed to this being a situation where there is nothing untoward happening. If you use that quote, you can use it on family members or friends and see what their response is. That pretty much guaranteed 90% of the time they're going to believe that there was something untoward happening. But a great lawyer would know the proclivities of his audience, of that judge, because that makes a difference how you fashion your argument. It doesn't mean that you play golf or bridge or that you go to lunch with that person. But in the minds of the public, I think that that's what it does mean. So in any event, I'd like to sort of move on to what I consider to be sort of a troubling trend that I see developing. And that trend is basically sort of to delegitimize some of the institutions in our society that we have come to rely on. We've gotten to the point, and I'm wondering if I were, still raising children, what my position would be with respect to this. But you have to start to ask yourself a question whether truth actually matters when people can promote alternative facts as if they're the truth. Does truth actually matter? Can you just say and do anything and there are no consequences? Is it really ethical and professional to do something along those lines? There was a statement made not too long ago, and I'm sure that you folks have probably come across this statement about the press being an enemy of the people as opposed to an essential element of our democracy. Think about that. So if you cannot rely on the statements that are being made, what do you rely on? When I was a kid, and maybe this is just a function of where I grew up, we had an expression, your word is your bond. And a lot of times people were so poor, that's all they had was their word, their good name to rely on. But if truth doesn't matter, where does that actually leave us? Where does that leave us? Chris Wallace, who is a commentator, actually I guess he's more of a journalist for Fox News, he was really, really upset. And I was on the internet and I came across a statement that he made, and I'd just like to talk to you a little bit about that. In response to the notion that the press was the enemy of the people, he said, that crosses a line. That crosses a line, and he felt the need to speak out against it. He said, a free and independent press is necessary in a free society, and as part of the fabric of our free society, and democracy requires that. So truth has to matter. We can't have fake news. But it's not actually limited to the news gathering process that you see this trend. It even applies to the intelligence community. And I'm speaking of the FBI and the CIA, and I was raised in an era of time where we had our conspiracy theories. And so it's not like I believe wholesale everything that is fed to me, but you refer to those people as Nazis. It's concerning. These are people that are supposedly dedicated to providing information, intelligence, so that our leaders can have information on which to act on behalf of the nation. But if truth doesn't matter, if people are just acting outside of the scope of what their undertakings are, where does that actually lead us as a nation? Judiciary is actually also part of this troubling trend. Federal Judge Gonzalo Curio, he is the judge that was assigned to the Trump University case. He happened to be of Mexican heritage, and it was decided that he could not appropriately decide cases because he was pro-Mexico. The decision with regard to the initial immigration ban, Federal Judge James Robart was said to be a so-called judge. Again, that you could not rely on what he was doing because he was just a so-called judge. He wasn't actually a real judge. Or the circuit judges said actually came out and affirmed the decision that he reached. He said that those judges were acting politically as opposed to fulfilling their obligation under Article 3 of the Constitution as Article 3 jurist. And I bring up Article 3, I think it's Section 2 if I'm correct. If I'm not mistaken about that, and Section 2 basically says that judges, federal judges, are given lifetime appointments with no diminution of salary to make sure that they resided above the political fray, so that they were decidedly not going to be political in terms of how they approach their job. This actually reminds me of the seminal case of Marbury versus Madison, which defined the boundary between the constitutionally separate executive and judicial branches of government. In Marbury, the Supreme Court famously said, "It is the job of the judiciary to say what the law is, not with respect to whatever political alliances may exist, but the simple function of saying what the law is." So let's go back to public trust. Public trust is impacted by our perception, and perceptions are framed based upon whether or not people actually believe them. And the stronger a person believes in a perception, the more it becomes a reality. Even if it's not true, that perception becomes reality if it's strongly held. The current tide of distrust questions the integrity of all of us, and we have to be concerned as members of this society. One of the things that I think that you'll believe is true, because I think it's inescapable, is that our society tends to look at people in blocks or in groups. And so if there is a problem with a member of a particular group, and I'm talking about the legal profession, then we're all sort of painted with that same broad brush as far as the public is concerned. Why do I bring that up? Because I believe that when you start to have situations where there's delegitimization of the folks in our society, whether you're talking about journalists or you're talking about lawyers and judges, that when you start to look at painting that group of people with that broad brush, that injures everyone within that group of people. So we all have to be sort of concerned about the delegitimization of what is going on in our society. Because we don't need to sort of be looked at with scorn by proxy. If people can't believe what a lawyer tells them, then the lawyer's advice and counsel means nothing. That sets up an untenable paradigm. So what do you make of these times that we're living in? One of the interesting things about you guys as students at Cooley Law School is that in the past, the students have created their own sort of list of values and own codes of conduct that incorporates their values to guide everyday life. The idea was to be prepared to be able to respond ethically to challenges, whether they were personal or professional. One question that comes to my mind is whether we're living in sort of a time of a sea change, or whether this is just sort of an important time that we live in. I think that only history will be the final arbiter of whether we're in the midst of a crisis or simply a very important time. There's a Republican senator out of Nebraska by the name of Ben Sasse, and he has an interesting quote. He says, "We're seeing a civilization warping crisis of public trust." Remind me of a quote from John Fitzgerald Kennedy. He said, "When written in Chinese, the word crisis is composed of two characters. One represents danger, and the other one represents opportunity." Danger or opportunity? I choose to believe that this is an opportunity for us to actually refocus and emphasize the integrity of the legal profession. This is actually my modest proposal, that we actually get refocused, recommitted, understand that things are sort of upside down, and that we all have a role to play because we're all interconnected in terms of how we're viewed as a group of people. So it is incumbent upon us to make sure that we do what we can on behalf of ourselves, to save ourselves. First and foremost, the rules of professional conduct require that you act with a high degree of fidelity. Even for judges, there's canon 2 that says that a judge is supposed to, at all times, conduct themselves in a manner to promote public confidence of the integrity and impartiality of the judiciary. So I'm starting to actually get a little bit, this is getting a little bit heavy, and I see guys sort of like, I'm getting stressed a little bit here. I don't want you to be stressed. I want you to be uplifted and happy about our time together. So my proposal is, again, we're not going to eat the kids, okay? A little bit of nervous laughter, that's good, okay. But I do again say that this is a time for us to remember that our actions are important. Our actions actually speak louder than words. Evidence of true integrity is actually what you do on a day in and day out basis when you think nobody's watching. That's real integrity. That's when you really are not operating for the cameras or for some third party's benefit, but operating because it's the right thing to do, being in touch with your own truth. That's the kind of truth that I don't believe is shakeable. We're talking a lot about integrity. And one of the things that I think young people really and truly need to understand, and maybe this is just a function of me getting older, even though I'm obviously not as old as Jim Robb, right? Is that it takes years, maybe even decades, to develop a reputation for your integrity, for your professionalism. It takes years and years of doing the right thing, but it only takes seconds for that to be destroyed. Think about that for just a second. Years to develop a reputation that you would be proud of, seconds to destroy it. The abilities to help others, to challenge injustice, and to make sure that what is wrong is made right is one of the privileges of a law degree. For you who are still students, you're striving to be in a position to be able to, as I said at the outset, to be able to earn a living, basically helping other people. That is a tremendous privilege. And so I hope that you honor that privilege that you're looking to earn, because it's important not only to you, it's important to the profession that I love. So I'd like to leave you with a quote. And this quote comes again from John Fitzgerald Kennedy. He says, "With a good conscience, our only sure reward, with history, the final judge of our deeds, let us go forward to lead the land we love, asking his blessings and his help, but knowing that here on earth, God's work must truly be our own." Thank you very much for your kind attention. I would like to take just a moment or two, if I could. Don't leave, because I might
take a moment or two for questions.
That's exactly what I was going to do.
Okay.
That's exactly what I was going to do, because we actually, in the build-up to me actually making my comments, there was some discussions about some of the things in my background, and I've held a lot of different kinds of jobs, but I have been able to hold a job too. I don't want anybody to think that I'm not able to hold a job. I actually can hold a job, but I've had a lot of varied and interesting experience, and so I wanted to give people an opportunity to ask questions, and I have very, very qualified co-counsel to assist me. So if you have a question, we would love to be able to entertain. Nobody has a question?
I do.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you always know you wanted to be a judge, or did it something that just kind of
Probably
trickling in?
it was a little bit of both.
Okay.
It sort of came trickling in because I was raised in a household where there was a notion that you had to be a doctor, lawyer, Indian chief, or something. And so I was raised with an ethic that said that you had to be the very best of whatever it was that you were going to be, even if that was a street sweeper. It was actually almost a direct quote from my mother, that you had to be the very best at what it is that you were going to do. And so it sort of trickled in that way. But then once I had my law degree and I actually started to go to court and to watch what it was the judges did, I said, I could do that. So it came to me like a bolt as well. And I actually was fortunate enough to clerk for a judge when I got out of law school. So it was a little bit of both. Come on, questions, please. I feel like I've cheated you guys if I don't get to answer some questions. Yes. Yes, sir.
How are you?
I'm doing fantastic.
Let's talk shop a little bit.
Okay.
Drunk driving, and maybe I think you mentioned opioid court. Was it opioid?
Actually, it's sort of a mishmash of everything. It's called a sobriety court, but sobriety embraces so many different forms of addiction.
Can you speak a little bit? What are some of the challenges associated with that? And I don't know if you were tying in your society question earlier with the sobriety court, or just talking about society generally. But my pharmacy back in the day experience makes this topic sensitive to me, and I'm curious as to what kind of challenges it raises for somebody in the legal aspect.
So we have a society that is awash, I'll just use the ABA's term, awash in drugs, prescription drugs more specifically. Let me just share a little factoid with you that I think kind of puts it into perspective. The United States of America, these United States, represents approximately 5% of the world's population. Well, we consume approximately 90% of the prescription opiates. 98% if you were just focused on Vicodin. One more time, 5% of the world's population, over 90% of the consumption of opiates. Challenges? Trying to figure out what the real problem is so that you can work towards a solution. If you don't know what the problem is, you've got no shot at coming up with a solution. And for each individual that you're dealing with, the problem can have certain different sort of shades or characteristics, so it makes it challenging to be able to know what you're supposed to do. I mean, you have a general sort of framework in your mind about how to attack problems, but it has to be individualized with regard to that particular person, because one size doesn't fit all. So what happens is, and the reason that this is an issue for the judiciary to kind of sort of back out at 30,000 feet, we're all very concerned about what we call recidivism. Recidivism means just simply a person being rearrested. Why are we concerned about? We're concerned about that because, quite frankly, that means that the person is out making new victims when they are getting into other difficulties that are going to cause them to be arrested again. So what is it that we have to do in a situation like that? Well, we have to figure out what's going on with that individual to find out whether there is a way to stop the madness. Definition of insanity, continuing to do the same thing without expecting a different result. So if you're starting to continue to have this sort of revolving door, like that door over there, the person keeps coming back into the criminal justice system because the original problem had never been addressed, that is a problem for the judiciary. it is also a problem for society because that person is making victims of members of society in the process. Sort of segue away from opiate addiction to, let's just talk about alcohol. Alcohol is one of the most common drugs, and it is a drug, even though people tend to separate it out. It is a drug that people use and abuse. Not illegal to drink and drive, but it's certainly illegal to drive when your blood alcohol is over a certain level. So, Professor Dodson, to answer your question, it's basically looking at these people who are, and this is the most dangerous form of behavior that people commit on a regular basis, drunk driving. And they do it because they don't believe it's really a problem. As a matter of fact, I'd say probably 85% of the people that appear on my docket never in a million years thought that they would be on my docket. And that's the reason that they're on my docket. It's because they didn't think it was going to happen to them. And that's how cars get wrapped around poles and trees and people end up dying, is because I didn't think it was going to happen to me. Nobody actually wakes up in the morning and says, you know, this is the day I'm going to kill my best friend in a drunk driving accident. No one thinks when they look at themselves in the mirror as they're washing their face that they're going to drive their car through somebody's living room. But that's why it happens. That's why it happens. So you're always in a space where you're trying to figure out what you need to do. Yes, Professor Scott.
One of the things we've talked about with our students here at the law school is that when you enroll in law school, it changes who you are, and your behavior has to reflect that change. What I'd like to ask you, in terms of being a judge, has it presented itself with unique challenges in terms of how you live your life on a daily basis?
I just took a sip of tea and I almost spit it out. That would have been so gross because she's got pictures. I mean, she's got this thing on the tripod and everything. That would have been bad. It might even come out my nose. The short answer is yes, but necessarily, because of the things that we were just talking about at the outset, that people are watching what you are doing because you are a person that has a title behind your name. Actually, I guess it's in front, Judge Allen. You're a person that people have expectations about, and those expectations are based on their perception of how you are supposed to be. And given the privilege that I have as a person with that title and what it allows me to do on behalf of, my profession and what it's done for my own sort of personal gratification, it just kind of comes with the territory. And if I didn't want it, it doesn't matter. It's there. So yeah, it affects all aspects of how I don't cut people off. I don't give people the finger as I'm driving down the street. This integrity award is really kind of on point. So no, yes, it does change, and that's necessarily that it does have to. But what you should understand as young legal beagles, it changes you too, whether you want it to or not. It, in fact, does change you, necessarily. So you are a lawyer 24/7, 365 days a year. And if you have some doubts about that, you should look at these pronouncements from the state bar. It will convince you that you are in all of your dealings with people. So if it has to do with the plumber that comes to your house or the cable guy or whatever, it does not matter. It applies to you. One of the helpful hints that I got, and I don't know if this still is even available to you at this point, but when I was working early on in my career, a guy that I worked for said, you know what you should do? You should always, when the State Bar Journal comes out, flip to the back of the Bar Journal and see what the orders of discipline are and what people are getting into trouble for. I started reading that stuff. Not getting in touch with your client, keeping that client advised as to what's going on with their case can cause you to be disciplined, can cause you to lose your ticket, your ability to feed your family. I don't know if you guys, I mean, this is like an information age and everything's online, so I don't know if you guys are still getting actual paper copies of those documents, but certainly that would be something that I would encourage you to do, because I still do it even to this day. I think there was another question.
Judge Allen, as a former criminal defense attorney, I've seen the revolving door and represented felons in many different types of cases, extensive amount of cases. The end user frequently feels the impact of drug sales. I'd like you to comment. There was a recent case in Detroit where an MD physician was engaged in producing in large volumes scripts without the names of the patients, with opioid prescriptions and other drugs being attached to that just to make it look like it was full service. She had a runner that would then take those scripts, go out and pay people $40, $50 to their name and go in and fill those scripts and pull the opioids, and the runner would then sell those on the market. The runner ended up, they prosecuted the two of them, and the runner ended up getting 12 years in prison for controlled drug sales and distribution. The physician got 8 years and profited by some $14.8 million by writing scripts and charging for services of counseling patients who never obviously got those consultations. So Medicare lost some $14.8 million. And the end result, she was prosecuted for fraud, which carried with it a lower consequence, at least to her. So the end user frequently is the end, and it's often not just a function of race, it's often a function of economics. I serve clients in northern Michigan, and most of the lower economic class was the one that suffered, and I think that's true across the board.
It's actually sort of a social commentary, though, isn't it? I mean, when you think about it, because, I mean, we had a long philosophical conversation in this country about the disparity between crack and powdered cocaine for the same reason. But let me let you get to your question.
So I would just ask, you've been involved in, I believe, as I understand, prosecuting some of those healthcare fraud type of claims. What is your opinion on what could be done or what might be done to help prevent some of that abuse? And it's becoming worse, much worse. We've got this sort of mishmash of things that are going on in our country. And you're right that there are some people that are kingpin types that actually look at having lesser penalties for their involvement in the same behaviors. But, a lot of what we have are based upon sort of individualized sentencing, supposedly, because it's based on a grid, and, you're supposed to, the legislature has set out some parameters of what it is that a judge is supposed to consider. And so that kind of makes it a little bit difficult, but there's also conversations that are going on in our country now about decriminalizing some of the people that are at that runner level that you're talking about, the people that are engaged in actually using the substances. So there are a lot of different things that are going on. I mean, when you look at the person's criminal history, is the criminal history of the runner different than the criminal history of another person that might be involved? Maybe the same person charged with the same offense would have a different outcome based on their criminal history. So it's hard to say sort of in the abstract, but you would hope that at a very base minimum, that if a person was abusing the privilege of being able to practice medicine, that they would lose that privilege as a consequence of them being involved in the criminal justice system, which might be even more impactful in terms of the overall picture, with that individual no longer able to practice their profession, because that carries with it tremendous collateral consequences. So I don't know if that actually answers your question, because I think that, as I said at the outset, that there's just so many sort of moving parts to your question that it's hard to say.
Well, that was another great guest this week on the Law School Insider. If you have an interest in being a guest on the show, drop me an email at lawschoolinsider@cooley, COOLEY.edu. And thank you all for listening today, and remember, you have the ability and right to take control of your law school's success. I hope you'll continue listening, creating a plan for success that will prepare you to achieve the dreams that you have set for yourself. Talk to you next time. Thanks for listening. You're on your way to being a law school insider. Please subscribe to stay connected and come back again next time as we speak to more students, lawyers, and employers.